call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. We had a chance to look at them?
Yes, and as I explained to Christine before we called the meeting to order, there was a minor correction I wanted made to item number 5, probably 2/3 of the way down what would be page 4, and it references local code 43, and it should be 143. And I've just asked her to ink in that change prior to signature. No need to correct.
Make sure you're speaking to the mic if you could. That's how we're recording the meeting.
So just, like I said, ink it in, no need to go in and reprint the page. In addition, question, it looks like on the minutes and from memory, item number 4 from the last meeting on the probationary period, it looks like there's nothing on today's agenda that follows up on that item. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So that will be coming back
Okay.
at a next meeting.
And same thing on 5.
That is
Minutes
correct.
aren't as clear, but clearly the subject at hand under that discussion, something needs to come back somewhere in order to rectify physical exams for promotions in the rules, but not in reality. So nothing again on the agenda this time, but we will get something.
Yes, that is correct. Both of those items will be coming back.
Okay.
Yeah, I told Christine it seemed to be the meeting of concerns and no solution, so we will be bringing those back.
Okay. With those discussions had, then I move to approve with the corrected
Okay.
item that I asked.
All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to the daily action log. Hopefully, chance, any questions on that?
I do.
Go ahead there, Teresa.
Okay, again, item 5 on our agenda last time as reflected in our minutes. Big part of the discussion was around the promotion sergeant that was going to be made the following month. It does look like promotion did occur. There had been some concern that one of the candidates might be upset, offended with the promotion the chief might have made. Just clarify, follow up for us, that promotion occurred with no subsequent issues.
That's correct.
Okay. Also, right below that on our daily action log, there's a temporary promotion to police lieutenant of Daniel Williams. I don't show in here a subsequent promotion. So is Mr. Williams continuing to serve in that lieutenant position temporarily 6.5 months later?
As far as I know, that's the case. Chief Howard's here.
Good morning, Assistant Chief Howard. This issue was discussed in our recent command staff meeting, and a decision on whether to ask City for an additional lieutenant or have him stand down and go back to the rank of sergeant is forthcoming.
Okay, so this is a temporary situation. It's not that you have a vacant slot and a promotional exam hasn't been held. You've temporarily elevated
That's
this
correct.
officer.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
you're considering whether to seek an additional lieutenant slot.
That's correct.
Okay, because under the statute, as you know, you're only supposed to go so long. If you have an empty slot, you get a promotional exam and you move forward. So it
Yes,
was
ma'am.
it was just a new one for me, so thank you very much.
you.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
And then the last thing was, I don't see any discipline on here, and the last time I commented on that, it turned out there had been, but we hadn't been putting it on our log. This time, I'm trusting that there hasn't been any discipline since our last meeting?
There is one that I can see right off the bat. It's on the third page, towards the bottom.
The suspension?
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm guessing that's it. But yes, every suspension or discipline that occurred is on the log.
Okay.
It has
so-
been tracked.
So just that one? Okay, thank you. With those clarifications, I would move approval of the daily action log.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And moving on to the recognition for renewal for another term for myself.
Yes, so I obviously think that is very noteworthy. Thank you so much, and we do appreciate you serving on the board. You're starting your 10th term, and all of us in this table look forward to celebrating a full 30 years after your 10th term, which will be in 2025. So thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Okay. And now we move on to the election of chairman and vice chairman. What do you guys want to do? I'm easy.
I think you've done a fine job for all this time. Not that you were the chairman your very first term, but you have been for a long time. So I would move to continue that.
And you would be, and you would stay at the vice? I would move for that.
If Mr. Dago has no objection,
Okay.
Status quo is good for me.
I
Okay.
guess we vote on that too.
Okay. All in favor of maintaining status quo?
Aye.
Item 6, discussion of the local government code 143, section 143.006, implementation.
So, Section 143.006, Implementation Commissions, subsection E, as it applies to Civil Service Rules and Regulations, Local Code 143, Section 12, subsection E, to determine if a January meeting is preferred in order to elect a chairman and vice chairman or continue to meet as needed and hold such election during the first meeting of the calendar year. This is not an action item. I really just want some feedback in regards to preference. Electing the chairman, vice chairman, in this code, it says specifically that it happens in January. There is another code that indicates that you meet as needed. So there will be some change to the code after I get some direction from you, and I'll bring that back in order to approve it.
Okay.
Okay. Veronica, what are you referring to with respect to another code of as needed?
As far as the change, I'd like to include that language in there if
Yes,
that's,
but I understood you to say that in one place it says January and in another place it says as needed.
that's correct. Code, I thought I made a note of it. Let me find it real quick. There is a specific place in the local code that says that the commission meets as needed. No, I think it's in the local government code. Section 18, the
Okay,
commission.
And you're talking the local
Local
rules?
yes, the local rules.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And of course, that's true. We do have to meet as needed. If appeals of test examination questions arise or need for discussion of existing rules or need for discussion of new rules. But I'm not sure we have the authority or discretion discretion to suggest the change that you're asking. My email to you of the other day, I asked you to provide us with both the local rules and with the local government code, the actual statute. And Raul and Keith here. I didn't see the actual statute, so I went ahead and printed off copies for us. And I see Teresa has her handy little book. Christine, I'll bring this to you so that you have it for your minutes. But I have highlighted it on the second page, and this is the statute from the state of Texas that says in 143.006E, each January, the members shall elect a commission and a chairman and a vice chairman. And so it doesn't say unless you decide to do it at another time, unless you feel like doing it at another time. And of course, in January, we used to, as Raul and I were talking when Christine was over here administering the oath of office to him, we used to do that as part of the meetings. Lori used to swear people in, and then when she left, I started doing it, or Raul started doing it, and we had that as an official part of the meeting. Don't remember what else we might have done as a regular course of business in January, but again, at our last meeting, as reflected in item 6 on our minutes, you know, we were told that we had to go back to the 12-month probationary period for police officers because of what the statute in the local government code said, and didn't make a lot of sense based on the training period and everything else, but that's what the statute said, so that was the change we were anticipating coming back. And so now I don't know that we can unilaterally just decide, oh, but this one we can deviate from. And then interestingly, we had the Klinger case in our background material. And I wasn't here when Kay argued the Klinger case before the Court of Appeals, but since Kay kind of followed me as a civil service attorney, she communicated with me very closely on her work on this case. And of course, Judge Abusi, who is not from San Angelo, but has called San Angelo her home since she and John finished law school and returned to John Hay's hometown, you know, within this case, Judge Abusi notes, the city acknowledges that it must comply with the entire statute. So I am not in favor of useless meetings, of meetings where time is wasted, but I don't know that we can do the change that you want. Of course, Teresa can give us her opinion on that. I just think that we need to, you know, be aware that the statute, for whatever reason, says January.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, and definitely my intent is not to do anything other than what we need to comply with. And if that means that the rule stays the way it is, then we'll have that January meeting. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the last January meeting I can remember has been 9 years ago. I don't know, it's been a long time.
Well, and I think that's part of the issue we are noticing, especially as Veronica's come in, and Veronica is very much a rule follower, and she's a stickler for
Oh,
rules.
I worked with
And
Veronica.
so she's
I'm well aware of
spending
that.
a lot of time comparing all the various rules we have. We have a code of ordinance provision that covers this board. We have our local rules, and we have the statute. And the only person who can change local rules to make it all comply is you guys. So we want to bring those things when we see conflicts to you to make sure that we're all on the same page, which
And
is
that's
most of
where-
our agenda today, actually.
That's kind of where I was going with this. Maybe that's what we need to focus our January meeting on. Let that be the meeting where these things kind of, from the year before, you know, just come back and we go through them. I mean, we sat in this room, Veronica's, the very first meeting, when we replaced Brian as Civil Service Director with Veronica, and we had a discussion about some things we had had on agendas years prior that had never come back to us. And one of them was the hearing test. And remember, we had to do that. And it's like, they seem to be not falling through the cracks exactly, but sort of. And, you know, Veronica and I had a phone conversation. Well, we had one last week, but we had one, 6, 7 weeks after our last meeting. And we talked about some of these things. And, you know, I don't know if we need a volunteer from our commission to come in and work with her one afternoon a month or something to maybe go through those. I don't know if she could devote the time to it, but it's like the rules probably need to be gone through from start to finish. And, you know, Teresa, I don't know if you or somebody from your staff, you know,
Yeah,
would be
that's what we're
available to
doing.
work.
I mean, that is definitely what we're working on.
But-
Time is an issue, and we're kind of addressing things as they do come up and as we find them. And there's also the additional layer of that there's a conflict sometimes between our code and the rules, and then the director historically hasn't followed either one of them. They've done their own thing. So
I agree.
and we get the answer, well, that's how it's always been done, but we can't find it in any of the rules where that's appropriate. So I think we are doing that right now. Veronica and I have talked about the need to dedicate time to sit down and go through the rules and make sure that a lot of those conflicts, but right now it is basically
Hit and miss?
not a hit and miss, but as things come up, we study it and evaluate it and figure out what needs to be done. And I think the fact that thorough review hasn't occurred previously is just an indicator that there really is a pretty good relationship between police and fire and the commission and the staff. So there aren't a lot of issues that do come up and arise frequently enough that we would notice those conflicts a whole lot.
Well, to a certain extent, I think you're right, but we've had more rule issues the last few years than we
Previous.
addressed previously. I'm not going to say more than we actually had, and you may have just hit that nail on the head. The director just kind of called it and dealt with it.
Yeah, I think there's some benefit to having somebody in the director's seat who's not ever done that job before, because they're learning all of the different rules, and they're able to see, I think, conflicts in them a lot easier than people who believe they understand them to some
Well,
extent.
every director I can think of going back to the 70s, that's been their first time to deal with that. I mean, it's like,
Wow.
I
This
think
one's really a
I
stickler.
think she's the first one who is really focusing in on the issues.
Well, I'm doing my
Except for
bestest, so.
Tad had dealt with civil service before, but McDougal hadn't, John Richardson before him hadn't, Jess Stanford before him hadn't. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's gone back a long time where they hadn't, but I don't know, I would like to see us handle these. And as I said, you know, if in January we need to do a work session in conjunction with our oaths of office and election of chairman and vice chairman, you know, there's nothing that says we can't have a work session.
Yeah, so I think that would probably make the most sense. I've made a note of it so that if there are no other agenda items, then, we use that time wisely and have a
Yeah,
work session.
and I mean, and I think, you know, the departments, if they have noticed things in the rules that they want to bring to the commission, and we can discuss with staff as to whether we think we should, not an existing issue or problem that has to be solved imminently, but just something they see as a problem. They can, you know, be invited to come and make us aware, and y'all can decide whether, you know, something like that. So that's my 2.5 cents worth, or 3 if you want to go with the inflation of the day.
Well, it's always good to have somebody on the commission
And I'm sorry, I didn't
that's
mean-
been over on that side of the table too, so.
Yeah. So for this particular item, we will revert back to following the statute and make sure that we have that January meeting. I don't think that's happened in quite some time. So, okay. I'm good with that.
But I do appreciate, I assume this got on the agenda based on our discussion last week? Okay, well, I was surprised to see it, but I don't think it was a bad thing.
Good deal.
Okay.
Okay, I know. taught. Okay, yeah, do you have an agenda?
I got it right here, yeah.
Okay, number 6. I'm sorry.
I think we just did number 6, didn't we?
No, I was talking about 6 on the old minutes.
On the old minutes.
No, I'm sorry, you're right, number 7.
Okay, number 7 on the agenda, discussion guidance related to rescheduling the assistant chief, fire department, exam due to cancellation postponement this past January.
So there was an assistant chief promotional exam scheduled for January 14th of this year, for which there was no vacancy for at the time. It was canceled due to not having the required number of participants available to sit for the exam due to COVID, which according to the local rules, the minimum number is required to make a promotional exam competitive. So I'd like to have some discussion and have some specific questions for the commission to give us some guidance. Would this reason for not having the minimum number of participants available to sit for the exam due to COVID allow for a postponement versus a cancellation?
Okay, you had
It's-
enough candidates sign up to take the exam.
That is
Just you
correct.
Did not have enough show up on the date and time
To
to take the exam.
There were not enough, available to sit for the exam on that date. It is the preference of city management that it be postponed and eligible for rescheduling with the same number of applicants, the same applicants that originally applied.
Well, and I wanted to say, this is like one of those COVID things that came up. COVID like disrupts everything. We had actually enough people show up at the site, but one of them was still in the isolation period for COVID. And so at that point.
Sent home?
Yes. And so we sent them home. And so, of course, that was not well received, and if I had been in that position, I wouldn't have well received it either. But at the time, I mean, we had city regulations regarding isolation periods. You know, we as a city are still, if people are showing up in public places too often with positive COVID, we are considering formal isolation. It is still considered, a communicable disease under the statute. So it's a very unique situation that occurred. And as she said, Daniel's preference is that it be postponed and not canceled, because the other option could allow lower rank employees to come and test. But again, this is one of the places in the past the director has made the decision, but our rules say that it's y'all's decision to make, so.
Okay.
And that is a separate agenda item.
Yeah,
in
we're going to
regards
talk about
yeah.
that rule in a little bit. But
Okay.
on this item, we just want guidance on should it just
So
be a
the rule
postponement?
indicates the cancellation.
The rule indicates that if you don't have 4 people, that, I believe it says postponed, but that has not been the practice in the past. If there's not 4 participants, it's canceled and dropped to the lower rank.
And the rule
The
also
next rank.
requires.
That's typically because you simply don't have enough applicants, period.
Sign up.
Okay.
But this time you do have enough applicants,
Yeah,
so.
it
The
was just,
difference being cancel, you have to repost, reopen, go through the whole waiting period and all of that. A postponement would allow you to continue under the existing post of the exam, existing candidates, existing testing materials, etc.
With a 10-day
So-
posting, yes.
yeah,
Notice.
within
Would
10.
make things happen in a more
Expedient,
expedient manner.
Yes.
Which I think at this point, at the time we did the test, there wasn't a vacancy, but now, I mean,
There
there's still
is.
technically not, because I think
Okay.
Patrick is still interim, but
I have a question
needs
for you
help.
guys. So let's say we vote for rescheduling, which that's what I'm leaning toward. Let's say during that time period, it gets canceled in January, we reschedule in April. Is it conceivable that an additional candidate would be eligible during that delayed time period? Would they be then allowed to test?
For this particular test, no, because there are only 4 bat chiefs. So that's all that can sign up
Okay.
if it's
But if
postponed,
it was a different test,
potentially.
do you understand my question?
But there would still already have been a sign-up date. So I don't think that needs to be extended, or would we would be able to extend the sign-up date. It starts on a particular date and ends typically about a week before the examination date. So that wouldn't be
So that would
reopened.
be locked down.
Okay,
Okay,
I would think so.
If you cancel, and it's not assistant chief, but lieutenant driver, whatever, if you cancel and have to repost, then it's a whole new sign-up.
That is
If
correct.
you postpone, it's not a whole new sign-up.
Yes.
It's just the 10 days, 10-day required posting, notice of the exam, then administer the exam.
And if it is the assistant chief, if you cancel, then we would have also the decision, do we let lower ranks in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you don't have enough, then
Right.
you can open it. Okay, so,
Okay.
So I do think,
yeah.
yeah, I think
anybody?
there are.
Good morning. Thank y'all for coming out today. I know this is, y'all's time is valuable. So it is of my opinion, Patrick Brody, interim fire chief, it is of my opinion that we should postpone the test and leave the available applicants just as they are. Of course, I have a vested interest of replacing this position as soon as possible, of course.
Are you wearing two hats right now?
Yes, ma'am, I am. I don't know if you can see. It's pushing me down a little bit. But in all seriousness, I do believe that the test should have been postponed. We cannot control what is going on with COVID right now. Every day the rules are changing for us and all healthcare providers. And I think we have to make good decisions as they come up. And I think the day of this exam, it was real difficult to make a decision at that point. Not to mention, I believe HR's department was spread extremely thin. I think they only have one person. In order to accommodate somebody that was potentially infectious, you would have to have multiple people. So I definitely understand why the test wasn't administered at that time, but I am certainly 100% in favor of the postponement. And then let's wait the 10 days and give those 4 applicants the opportunity to test. Do you have any questions for me?
Not exactly a question, a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure that Veronica was extremely regretful that what happened, and regretful she had to make the decision she made. You've been in here and heard us discussing our minutes from our last meeting. And one of those things was our rules said one thing. In this case, it said postpone, but she canceled because of past practice. Last time we were discussing physical exam requirements. Our rules say you do it for promotions, but past practice for years had been we didn't. So we gave them direction on that item. Well, past practice is what we have to do with respect to this promotion. We can't, okay, the first guy got promoted to sergeant without a physical, but now, because there's a question on 2 and 3, we're gonna impose it off the same exam. So we felt it fair and right. I think Mr. Hidalgo actually, emphasized that the most, that we can't change the rules in the midst of. So I think she did what this commission had instructed her to do. When recent past practice deviated from the rules, follow past practice. But we're here today to, I think, determine whether we want to give her the direction of going back and following the rule. And, shame on whoever deviated from what the rules said in the past. But, yeah, I mean, I hate that what happened to you guys. And I'm sure our chairman and Mr. Hidalgo do too. And it's not fun to know that you're going to have to restudy all that test material weeks and weeks later, because no matter how good your memories are from January till whenever she's going to be able to administer it again, you've got to go back and review that. And it's hanging over your head, and it's an impediment to your life because you can't really move on. You can't leave it behind. So, yeah, I'm very, very sorry it happened. I'm very sorry we inadvertently let it happen by not knowing as a commission that practice had deviated from what the rules said. And so, I mean, my input would be postponement is what the rule says. Postponement is the only logical choice to make, and it's the best choice to make.
Absolutely.
So that's my 2.5, 3 cents worth.
And I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to reaffirm what's been said. My discussions with city management, from an HR perspective, we think the fair thing is to just postpone.
Thank you. We will move forward in that direction. My other question in regards to this is,
We're gonna move it to-
Well, okay, she said she didn't put this on as an action item, correct? So.
We were looking for guidance.
Other than giving
Just
her our
guidance, just
input,
guidance.
other than giving her our input today,
Okay.
that's, I think, all she.
so my additional question is, in regards to this, is what does the commission see as allowable for postponement? So if this happens again and there's a COVID infection, I know that I can move forward with postponing. If it's hospitalization, if it's, I mean, we could get into many things. My preference would be that we allow it for COVID. There's a specific quarantine period that will eventually end, and we know that we could move forward with a rescheduling of a test. Any other illness, we have not allowed postponement for that I'm aware of. And it would be difficult to determine what's allowable for postponement due to anything else. It could be a long-term illness. It could be a short-term illness. So I just want to be clear in how I administer the rule of postponing.
And then there's another issue that came up during this has unveiled a lot of conflicts between rules and authorities, so that's why it looks so technical. We did have somebody who stepped up and said, I'm willing to come in and sit for the exam. It was still within the application period, but it was just a couple of days. We knew we were going to have a COVID issue, so they wanted just to fill a seat and not actually participate in the test. And so I guess that's the other direction we need. Should we have allowed that person? We're going to bring back an item next time on the specifics of that position, because I think there's something unique about it at the BC level, and we're not prepared to talk about it today. But is that underlying idea that just showing up for the exam sufficient if it had been somebody who we thought could participate anyway? And that's part of the reason you have that case in front of you. So in this particular instance, we have our code of ordinances, we have the statute, we have the rules, and then we have this Klinger case that discusses competition and competitiveness and what that means. We do know it means a certain number of people have to be there, but there's also language in here that I, as an attorney, can't ignore, and you guys get to make the decision on what it means. That essentially says they have to be competing applicants, not just an applicant, but a competing applicant. And so just moving forward, and there's other things on this agenda that we think are going to remedy this problem, but especially at the BC level, we require 4 people. There are 4 BCs. Do they all have to compete, or we automatically drop it to the captains? That doesn't seem necessarily like the best choice, so we're going to address that in a later item, but what does competing applicant, as the court has told us we have to consider, actually mean?
Another possibility is one of your 4 decides they don't want to take the test. Now you're down to 3. So what
Yeah.
do we do now?
Well, that one's pretty easy, I think, that we just drop it down. But if we have somebody who, say, is qualified otherwise, they know that person's dropped, and then somebody else steps up at the last minute and says, well, I'll test just to fill the seat.
Okay, on that, obviously, I am kind of with the Klinger case myself. I think you have to have competitive candidates to take the exam. Somebody who comes to fill a chair is a subterfuge, thwarting the intent and the spirit of the law and the case. But Veronica, with respect to what you asked before, Teresa, I don't know that I want to limit it COVID, maybe pandemic, because, the health experts are telling us this isn't the last. And eventually, rather than naming them Omicron and Delta, we're going to actually have a new disease name, and it won't be COVID. So I think if we limit it to COVID, you're going to be kind of tying your hands, so pandemic. response might be more appropriate. But, I mean,
That's good.
that's my kind of 2 cents on that. And then on the issue that Teresa was bringing up, I mean, I don't know. Competitive or come and fill a chair so they have enough bodies.
I think it should be competitive.
Isn't that what the case indicated, as you pointed out?
It says competitive applicants. The statute
Right.
does not, I mean, it just says applicants. But again, we have the additional layer. In this case, there is a court who's interpreting
And that is a
for
San
us.
Angelo case, so.
It is a
it-
San Angelo case. We're
Yeah.
not looking at other jurisdictions. And there's we all talked about this, and it's going to be really hard to prove. If there are 4 people there and you get 4 score sheets and only one of them passes or whatever, it's hard to tell what's in somebody's mind. I think it's legitimate for somebody to go sit for an exam, knowing they're not going to pass it, but just to get the experience before they take it when they really want to pass it. So I think there's a number of things that play in, and we may never see this scenario again, but in this case, we do know that the one person who wanted to just fill a chair only wanted to fill a chair.
Which is admirable. I mean,
Yeah.
that person is doing something for
Others.
the department so that the promotion can move forward, for the guys who did study, who wanted to take the test, to not delay their ability to take the test.
Right.
So, it's not a totally bad, negative thing when I say subterfuge. It's just a subterfuge to the law. If you knowingly allow someone to do that.
Hello, good morning. My name is Mason Matthews. I'm the president of San Angelo Firefighters Association. As we talk about the competitiveness, I guess, and we talk about defining what is competitive, we got firefighters that study, night and day for 90 days and walk in and make a 40. We have firefighters that maybe not even crack a book and walk in and make a 60. How are you going to measure that? It's been said during this process that, well, we know they're not studying. They were just signing up at the end. We know they're not studying because they haven't checked out any material. So, got a bunch of firefighters here today. So, by show of hands, how many of you have never checked out a piece of material for a promotional exam? By a show of hands, how many of you have walked in and passed the promotional exam without opening a book? So I just don't see how you're going. I understand what we're talking about, and I think we all agree that the promotional process does need to be competitive. I do agree. I think we all agree with that. My issue is through civil service, they have earned the right to sit for that exam, and I think you're really muddying the waters if you try to say, well, it says that you have to make a 70 to be even on the list. And we all know that making a 70 may not just be good enough. We need to make as high as we possibly can. But I think it gets very dicey there if you try to decide, there's lots of other dynamics there. So when we talk about competitiveness, I think it's important to define what is competitive, because I don't think there's just we know. I don't think that works. I mean, we have some people right now, one of the gentlemen that raised his hand, he's one of the 4 applicants for this test, and he promoted it one time without even opening a piece of study material. And he's our COVID firefighter, on that we're talking about today. So I think that is I think it's a slippery slope.
I don't think we disagree.
Right.
From what staff has said, this person openly acknowledged they were just going to sit there to occupy. So that was an open admission. I don't think they're wanting to make subjective judgments
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
on whether you're a worthy candidate to sit there or not.
Right.
That person just,
Yeah, when faced with actual
Right.
evidence, this has
So-
occurred.
so- and it-
yeah, and staff can't overlook that.
Yes, ma'am.
But no, they're not going to check with the chief's office
Mm-hmm.
or bat chiefs or the different stations to see who's checked out what,
Mm-hmm.
and did it look like they highlighted or made no, we're not advocating that at all. That's strictly up to you.
Yes.
I've taken many tests, I bet Teresa has too,
Mm-hmm.
that she didn't open a book on. She knew the material and aced it without ever spending a minute on it. So yeah, we've been there. We understand. I bet Mr. Hidalgo and Colonel Lopez, same thing.
Yes.
So we get your point.
Well-
And I would not advocate for any change to the rule that put in any subjective judgment on adequate study or anything like that.
Well, and the only reason I brought that up is through our conversations, it was brought up, well, we have clear evidence that they're not studying because they didn't even check it out. And that's where we had a big issue with that, because that's not needed.
There
It's
was a
not
whole bunch of
required.
reasons that we believe that people weren't studying, or that at least one person wasn't studying. And I want to clarify, there was discussion on, as we were all trying to work through what has happened and what we've seen and what tried to happen and how do we adjust the rules, that there was a conversation about, well, we need at least 2 people to pass the test. Nobody is considering making that request at this time. We don't think that that's an appropriate rule.
To have 2 people.
To have 2 people pass the test to be
One's
competitive.
enough, yeah.
Yes.
What-
And as I said, this may never happen again, and we certainly hope it doesn't, because it certainly wasn't something that
Right.
make our relationship grow when it happens, but, and we want to make that relationship better. But in the event that something similar to this happens again, we do need some guidance.
And as far as admission of not studying, and I know it's a little different when you're talking, amongst each other, no one reveals what they're doing. It is very normal practice amongst ourselves. You studying? No, not really. Not really, because you're about to go in and sit with those people, so it's almost like a psychological fake out. So, yeah, I'm not studying. Yeah, I just signed up. I just wanted to see it, and they walk in and make a 95. So, I mean, that's all taken with a grain of salt, at least amongst us. I know that's very different when we're talking about it in a very formal fashion. I understand that's very different, but even then, I know that we tell people, oh man, I'm really studying. They walk in and bomb it, and inversely, I haven't even looked at it. I didn't check anything out. I'm not looking at it. Boom, 95, and they're number 1 on the list. Again, I don't know that that's clear either. So, anyway.
I just want to add something. Talking about experiences, my experiences are largely colored from the military.
Yes, sir.
I had an instance where I tested for promotion, missed it by half a point, and literally got my butt chewed by the chief because I missed it by half a point. And he asked, "Did you study?" I'm like, "No, I was deployed. Didn't have access." That didn't matter to him.
Right.
Figure it out. So I know where you guys are coming from. And, and then of course the next cycle I was number 1 selectee. So, and Teresa sort of echoed this. Everybody's different.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. So that, I don't want to get into selecting individuals based on any criteria whatsoever. I just want to make sure that I affirm what Teresa's saying.
Yes, sir.
Chief Howard?
You were up there and then you
Yeah, I
went back, did you?
Anyone keep studying?
Well, I didn't know if we had covered what he wanted to say or if he got tired of standing.
No, you addressed my concerns, and just through the history, I've seen where people would go take a seat and test just so there would be enough people there, and I've seen those people promote. So that's just to add. I won't go any farther. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm good on that item, Teresa. Commission, you're good on that item? I think we got the guidance we needed.
Okay. All right, so if there's no voting, okay.
No,
Moving on
that's
to
next item. Item 8.
Number 8, discussion consideration of revising the civil service rule, Local Code 143, Section 48, postponement or cancellation of examinations.
So to this rule, we want to include a few things, and we'll talk
Robin,
about.
let me interrupt.
Yes.
Now you want us to use the sheet that we
Yes,
had
thank
at
you
our
very much.
location today with the red, okay.
That is correct, thank you. We usually don't do PowerPoint, so I had completely forgotten to turn that on. I am going to try to do these going forward with any rule changes so that the audience can see what's going on too. So we can talk about what we're requesting on this particular section. There are 3 items. One is to authorize the civil service director to act, specifically in regards to examinations, clarifying who can test in the event there are not a sufficient number of competitive participants, and authorizing the chief to change the study material and modifying the notification of sources requirement in the event of cancellations. So first, authorizing the civil service director to act on behalf of the commission. Section 48 currently states the commission may postpone or cancel, although the civil service director has made these decisions in the past. So I'm just looking to change the language to mirror practice. And when we get to that section, we can, add a section 1, 248 that says the civil service director is authorized to act on behalf of the commission with regard to examinations. There are many other sections within the local rules that state the commission. I hope at some point when we do a review, we can specifically talk about the other sections. This obviously is just due to the instance we had with the postponed test.
Okay, so if I understand you, you want to replace the existing first sentence?
Not the existing first sentence. It would be adding a number 1, and then we'll go through the others as we go through this item, but adding a number 1, any changes are in green here. So the civil service director is authorized to act on behalf of the commission with regard to examination.
So
Okay.
basically, we want the language of our rules to be the same as what the practice has been to allowing the civil service director to make these decisions regarding testing and not having to call a meeting to deal with it.
Okay, well, I'm not following. So the language, the commission may, because of the small number of applicants for any position, is still there. But the civil service director is authorized to act on behalf of the commission with regard to examinations. That is so broad, that means if there's a question that there's some appeals on, the civil service director can throw it out without it coming to the commission. That, I mean.
We can make
I
that
think
more
that's a bit too
specific.
broad.
We can make that more
I
specific.
think, yeah, it needs to
With
be more
regard to
specific to.
scheduling examinations.
Yes,
Scheduling or postponing, canceling
Yeah.
examinations?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Specify a little bit more.
I mean, I think that was probably your intent, but just looking at the language, I think it's a little vague, broad, whatever.
Okay, so the civil service director is authorized to act on behalf of the commission with regard to postponing, canceling, and scheduling examinations.
I think that sounds
A little bit more,
reasonable.
yeah.
Mason, do you have
Yes.
something?
I guess and forgive me my ignorance here, but I guess what I don't understand is, and this is obviously regarding this issue, all right? I mean, that's what's hot and what we're talking about. You know, with it in 48 where it talks about the commission may, because of a smaller number of applicants for any position, or because of any other good or sufficient reason, postpone an exam. Why can't you just put commission in, as the civil service director? What's wrong with it as it states? I mean, is COVID not a good and sufficient reason where we could have just postponed? And if I guess what I'm saying is, what we're a little worried about is any rule change? I mean, I feel like it's already addressed in there. Does it need to be changed to give one person ultimate say-so? I guess that's, regarding what happened this time, I think as an association, we're a little worried that giving one person the authority to do so may create, allows some bias or some personal agenda there, and we're a little worried about that.
I can appreciate that. My background or perspective on this is I had a grandfather who was a police officer in Fort Worth from 1924 to 1960. Fort Worth is a civil service city.
Yes, ma'am.
It wasn't in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s until after the Second World War because there was no civil service statute.
Yes, ma'am.
He used to regale us at, Sunday dinner about what used to happen in both fire and police departments before there was civil service, and why there was a need for civil service in Texas. Yeah, they'd have promotion exams. What's the name of the chief's pet dog? What's the name of the assistant chief's daughter? Baloney questions. People were fired for arresting the mayor's uncle for DUI. People were promoted for not arresting the guy running the speakeasy down the street during the Prohibition in the 20s. So, yeah, there was a real need for civil service and not letting promotions be in the hands of favoritism, nepotism, and those kinds of things in both departments. So there is a danger in putting too much power in one person's hands. And that is why the statute in the 40s as it was written, and as you may know from your job with the Firefighter Association, they worked very hard to craft that the commission would be established. They made it a criminal offense in the statute for the chief executive of the municipality not to fulfill his duties and appoint the commission. And they even established in the law some pretty, at that time, ominous requirements for who could not be on the commission. You can't appoint your family members. So I get your point. I think that in order to facilitate the expediency we were wanting by not delaying from, it was January 14th that the exam was supposed to happen, and here we are March 4th. We need to give the director a certain amount of authority. You're afraid we're maybe verging on giving too much.
Possibly. I think that is a concern amongst the association. Given there was a lot that went on, there was a lot of circumstances with this issue. And I think what we were worried about, here we are talking about postponement versus cancellation. I mean, if one person couldn't just have made the decision that we canceled, we wouldn't even be sitting here talking about it, and there'd be a really big issue. So I guess as we were reading, and it already says that the commission, can, for a good sufficient reason, just postpone the exam, can you not just change that wording to say that the civil service director, because of a small number of applicants?
Well, I think that the good and sufficient reason needs to certainly transfer over to the civil service director, that it's not that we should have to have a good and sufficient reason, but the director doesn't. So, and I don't know that she was intending to remove that.
Right.
But,
Yeah, the statute just doesn't make sense to me in the context of open meetings where we have to have 72 hours notice for you guys to get together to make this decision.
of course, there was no Open Meetings Act.
That's
until
true,
service
when it
law
first
was
started,
passed.
so I think that that's part of our concern, is that there would be no way to cancel or postpone except for 72 hours, and so what then do they do? We send them home and say, we'll let you know? I mean, I think delegating that limited authority to, clearly in our rules, to the civil service director, is a rule that's going to last beyond us. It'll be one that's been practiced because it makes sense, and I think it's something that's going to make sense in the future too.
I assume that if a firefighter candidate had, or an exam candidate had a complaint with cancellation, suspension, et cetera, then they could bring it to our attention.
I don't think the way it's written, there's an appeal of that decision that's written in here. There's lots of legal remedies that they have. If they disagree, we could always write that there's a right to appeal a determination made by the civil service director. Again, this is a very unique situation resulting from COVID that came up that we anticipate is not going to happen anytime soon. It hasn't happened in the past. But I understand the point that you're trying to make. that if they do disagree, what is their remedy?
Yeah.
Yeah, and our authority is limited by the statute, and, you know, it used to be the commission's time was primarily taken up with disciplinary appeals. The commission handled all disciplinary appeals. In 87, 89, the arbitrator situation was added. That was not in civil service law until either 87 or 89. But we had authority over all, and believe me, I conducted civil service as the attorney, disciplinary appeals that lasted days. But the only other real authority we have is over the rules and over appeals of examination questions. And I think the statute, and I haven't looked at that aspect of it in a while, is pretty specific that those are our areas of authority. I don't know that we could
I think that the language related
deal
to.
with looking at a decision the director made on cancel after the fact, unless, I mean, it would almost be like, okay, give the test, but then again, have to have a meeting really quickly because the promotion couldn't be made off the test if there was an appeal of the decision until we met and decided whether it was a legitimate decision or not.
So the section that we're looking at is the promotional examination procedure, where the commission shall adopt rules governing promotions and shall hold them in accordance to create eligibility lists. That's pretty broad discretion for you to make rules regarding this process. So I think that we're not going to be asking for any kind of appeal or discretion or ability for them underneath the statute, but under the rules you create, you're going to say that if there's a disagreement on a cancellation versus postponement, that can come back. So it's under your general rulemaking authority that I think that we probably could do some sort of
Okay,
appeal
well,
of a general rule and not of the statute. It's creating a very complicated rule, though, for something that happened this time that we anticipate that hasn't happened in the past necessarily. It feels like one of those rules that's in response to a specific situation and not a
Okay,
general one.
Teresa, we don't have in front of us what you have. I asked for the local government code sections to be, that were related to the agenda, to be available to us. So are you saying you think we have the authority to add a rule that fire and police respectively can appeal the director's decision to the commission?
I think they could appeal, if you're creating a rule that's delegating your authority, and they believe that the authority after delegated was misapplied, you having a rule that comes back to you as the people who the statute says should make the rule. It's kind of like one of those mom and dad things. It's like, this is something dad always says, but he's going to let mom make the decision. But if they don't like mom's decision, they're going to ask dad, do you like her decision? So it's under your rulemaking authority and under the statutory authority related to appeals.
Well, without
very broad language.
looking at the statute and having a chance
I can bring you my book if you'd like to see.
No, I don't want to engage in that right now. I made the request and it didn't happen. Yeah, I'm not even sure we have the authority under the statute to delegate our authority. If the statute says that authority rests with us, the statute says that authority rests with, and so I'm saying if. So, I'm willing to delegate a certain extent of the authority if allowed by law. But that's just me. I'm just not sure.
Chief, you had a question?
I was just going to make a comment. Maybe the common ground on this issue is not necessarily give the full power to the civil service director, but give the power to make the decision to postpone pending a Civil Service Commission meeting 72 hours later, because we have a 10-day waiting period on any postponement. So we're going to postpone standard practice and then allow the Civil Service Commission to come in and rule and get all the facts together. But just, I don't know what the statute says on whether you can delegate that authority to her or to anybody in that position. So, but it just kind of thought of a common ground on both areas.
Well, and unfortunately, it took from January 19th, which is when the first email went out about needing to have this meeting, until today to have this meeting. So having a meeting occur within 72 hours is like slim to none, minus a few. In a better world, you could probably do it in 84, 96 hours, but I don't know about 72.
Well,
But
I think
that's
that 10-day
in a better
notice is like the minimum, so you could not repost the examination 6 days after the postponement. You would have to wait the required 10, but you could extend that beyond the 10. I mean, if circumstances, I think part of the delay is because several people, schedules were kind of busy, not to mention we had possibly people that could not show up because of COVID reasons. But I think the 10 days is the minimum before the reposting.
So do we want to go through the rest of the recommended changes and then determine what y'all are comfortable with and whatnot from there? Okay. So, number 2 on this addresses cancellation versus postponement. If an examination is canceled due to not having the minimum number of applicants for a promotional examination, the examination will be open to those in that position with less than 2 years service. If there is still an insufficient number, the commission shall extend the examination to members in the next lower position in salary to the position for which the examination is to be held with 2 years service in that position. That is the same wording in section 46 when you drop a promotional exam to the next level, to the next lower position. And again, this is clarifying that if an exam is canceled, which should be the only, other than not needing that position itself, should be the only time that you're going to drop the examination down to the next level if there's a cancellation, not a postponement. So in my mind, this is clarifying if a cancellation happens, this is what needs to occur next. And a cancellation would only happen if there's not enough applicants that sign up for the test.
And we already had this happen with the firefighter. I want to say it was a lieutenant promotion.
I'm sorry?
I said, didn't we already have this happen, I believe, with a firefighter lieutenant promotion where we had to drop?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have faced that.
Yes,
And that's
correct.
covered in Rule 46, I believe.
Yes.
That's one of our longest rules. That
Yes.
has a lot of information, but it's, yeah.
So, number 3, the study material may change at the discretion of the chief. That has been the practice as well. I don't believe, since I've been in this role, has the study material ever been changed when there's been a cancellation and a reposting to the lower rank. So that this chief still has the discretion to do it, though. And number 4, if the study material changes for a particular promotional examination due to postponement or cancellation, the notice with sources listed must be posted at least 90 days before the date of the examination. And that, again, is in the local rules as well.
Okay. On the one hand, if you take this rule as written, you'd still be over there at, I assume, the convention center with those guys, waiting for this meeting to happen because you don't have the authority to cancel it.
That's correct.
It says the commission has to cancel.
Yes.
So since this is the first time we've met since then, you'd still be over there and those guys would still be over there. And they get overtime, you don't, Veronica. So, I mean, the rule is clearly an impossibility to achieve. And I don't think I want to ask anybody to go through the minutes all the way back to, I can't remember if it was 48 or 49 when civil service was adopted here. I wasn't alive then. But I don't know that they ever had a commission to actually make that decision on the day of the exam. Now, there may have been situations where they had a meeting to postpone or cancel it before the date and time of the meeting, but you were in a catch-22 that day. So clearly, on a day of situation, under certain circumstances, I think you have to have certain authority to make a decision because the opposite just can't happen.
Can we put the wording, would this be acceptable, Teresa? We put the wording to say postponement until such a time as the commission can meet and make a decision?
Again, I think you could do that. I mean, that's basically what Patrick's asking for. He said 72 hours, but it's as soon as the commission can meet. I think it just delays unnecessarily things that happen that are pretty routine. So
Right.
this is the first time in my experience, not only here, but here or in Abilene, where this was the issue we're discussing, that this is the problem, that the civil service director made a decision on cancellation or postponement of test. I think it's a very unique situation. And I'd hate to create a rule that says all the ununique situations have to come back to the commission for a decision.
Say that last part again, you'd hate to make.
I'd hate to leave the rule where the commission has to make all these decisions, and then all these routine things that happen that result in postponement or cancellation have to come back to you guys. You'll be meeting a lot more frequently, I think.
Okay,
Potentially.
how many exams have you canceled or postponed since you've had the position, Veronica?
This is the first one.
Okay, so it's not like
It's
gonna
not all the
happen.
time,
Okay.
no.
And this was a
Okay.
rather unique situation too, really.
Yeah, so I'm not concerned with,
But it has happened in my time here more
Really?
than, yes. I mean, it's not an unnecessary thing, and it's always something that's agreed upon, but I don't think that it's such a unique situation to cancel or postpone an exam that it's never going to come back. But again, I mean, that goes back to what you guys want to do. I still think that giving the civil service director the ability to do that action on the day of an exam is the most expedient way to manage our promotional process.
but I don't know. I mean, I think we need a time and place opportunity to make the call, but for fulfilling our role, our duties and responsibilities, for meeting the concerns of the employees who have a stake in the statute, in the local rules, in the promotional exams, a review. I mean, whether it's an appeal of the director's decision or just a review and an approval, outside of the pandemic situation and maybe some other finite situations that we might want to identify. I think that makes sense.
Make it an agenda item at the first meeting after such an action.
Well,
Is that something that-
And that's what I was, when we talked about uniqueness.
I think we have to have, I mean, I don't think we can wait till something else comes up because by that time, whoever got promoted has been in the position for months,
Yeah.
perhaps. And if we disapprove the decision the director made, then you know, we've got some issues with,
So what kind of time frame are you looking at?
10 days.
10 days.
Yeah, and, I mean, I know we try to have all three of us here, but, you know, I think we can meet with two if we have to.
Yeah, okay.
That is correct.
Yeah, I said that thing, I know the answer to that question, but, does that sound?
Yes, and that's all I
reasonable?
was going to say, is what I was trying to say the first time when I came up here was, that is where our issue, or our concerns lie, is if someone were, you know, there was lots of, let's just take this exact situation, if that Friday would have happened and at her discretion, this was not unique, and she cancels the exam, there was lots of goings on with that. I understand COVID's one thing, but what if it's something else? And that's where we're worried, is that there's no recourse as to her,
Yeah.
that person's
Exactly.
decision. And that's just where our you know, our worries lie. But
10 days.
10,
I think we can do that.
10 days?
Yeah.
So could you clarify for us?
Yes,
So we
please.
can write it at what you're wanting us to do?
Go ahead, Teresa. Would you think 10 days would be sufficient? We don't have our legalese.
Well, you know, I think it's our job to give direction and input. I don't know that it's our job to craft. So, I mean, I'm kind of finding myself in a catch-22 at this point. I don't intend to do that right here on the spot.
But we don't want your actual language, just clarify
Well,
what direction
But I
you're
know she
heading.
has it on here as an action. This is the one of the ones you have on here as an action item, correct?
That is correct.
And I don't know how, with the discussion we've just had, we're gonna be able to put her in a position to walk out of here with a new rule. Now, if we want to temporarily adjourn and give y'all a chance to come up with something for us, I'm more than glad to make that motion.
We have a number of other
I
things
mean,
we're
I don't
bringing
think you
back.
go to
I think
the
we can bring
council
it
and have the
back.
council write ordinances. You bring them ordinances.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we will bring you language, but we need some, I'm not clear on what language you want us to bring you. We can bring it back to the next meeting. I don't think there's any urgency. We've gotten direction on this exam, but I want better, there's been a lot of discussion. I want to make sure we're on the right
There has.
page.
My
I think we've been
understanding,
real clear that postpone in event of pandemic. I think we've been clear that we need an opportunity to review on-the-spot decisions you have to make the day of the exam, because those are usually on Saturdays, right? Well, I
During the
mean,
week, but yes, I
okay,
mean,
promotionals
the day of.
can be during the week. It's just the entry level that you always do on Saturday, is that right?
Fire actually does it during the week as well, so,
Okay.
yeah. I'm sorry,
I
it's
mean,
PD. I'm correct. PD does them during the week, fire does them on Saturdays.
I don't know, I mean, is 10 days too tight a time frame? Do you want?
I missed the 10-day thing, so was it
That's to review, if you have to make an on-the-spot decision.
to review, for y'all to review within 10 days?
yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what we've thrown out. I mean, would you prefer 2 weeks, 14-day period? I mean, I think we could go that far, but I don't know that we could go any further.
I can make that happen for my schedule. 14
Y'all are a lot
days.
more difficult to schedule than us. We're here pretty much.
14 days would be my preference, just to give us a little bit more time. But, and obviously to, get an agenda together, post it, and
Well, we do
make sure.
14 days. The other advantage of that is it gives us, 3 of those days are going to be eaten up by the 72-hour notice, right? So
Yeah.
it really
Yes.
is
Yes.
11 days by the time you've decided, made the notice, et cetera. So I'm okay with 14 days.
So when you say an opportunity, you want all of them brought back? And not if there's like something in dispute?
I don't think the pandemic needs to be brought back.
Okay.
And I don't know that it has to be, I mean, I'm thinking there's a way to craft some language that if the applicants at the exam
Ask for.
are in agreement with the director, or are the ones who make the request that the action happen, that
We don't
it
need
doesn't
to-
have to
we
come
don't
to
have to
us.
do it.
That it only has to come to us if one or more feel it is not a good and sufficient reason.
Okay, so what if we write it that, and again, we'll wordsmith it better, that if they submit in writing a request to have you hear it within 10 days, then we'll bring it to you. And if there's no written request to us, then we won't bring it to
Within
you.
14 days.
14
Well,
days, yes.
if they submit the request at the last time, I mean, then that is dragging out the period to,
It would have to, the request would have to be received, in my opinion, the day of the exam.
yes, I think so. Now, understand, they may want to call you, Mason, to get your input, so on an exam day, you may need to be sure to be available.
I'd say within 48, they need written notice within 48 hours. I think that's a fair amount of time.
From the time of the
Generally,
decision.
If you, what we're saying is, if you've got a problem with the decision by the commissioner, you would appeal that decision within 48 hours, and then we would meet within 14 days to look at that. Any questions?
Donald White with the fire department. The problem with that is our promotional exams are always on Fridays. So 48 hours,
On Fridays?
they're always on Fridays. So the weekend. So if you say 48 hours, it's gonna have to be in on Sunday
Say
sometimes, so.
By the following Monday, close of business on the Monday following the promotion. Does that work for you?
Well, I mean, to cover police and fire, I guess we're gonna have to go 72 hours.
Okay, that's fine.
2 business days.
2 business
Or
days.
2 business days?
Well, but for fire, I mean, y'all are a 24/7 as a police, so, I mean, you're talking 2 business days for
days?
city
Whose
hall
business
staff.
days? Yeah.
Yeah. So 72 hours. that gets us
72
through.
hours? Okay. Thanks for bringing that.
But, I mean, you know, that puts us in the situation of if they'd had an exam, you know, and then, what was it? Martin Luther King
then
Day
there
was
was
a
a Monday-
Monday.
Monday
Yeah,
holiday.
yeah, that could put us outside of that, so.
Well, in writing can mean email. I mean, they can send us
Yeah.
emails any
Oh,
day.
yeah.
We
It could be
accept
email.
email.
You could- yeah.
And it was clear on the day of the exam that they were
Oh,
not
yeah,
happy with
okay.
the decision,
Okay.
so.
I mean, do you accept appeals on test questions by email, or don't they have to come in and get the form and fill all that out?
They
I
come
mean,
in and get the form, yeah. we don't-
Okay, so if we're gonna, I've got a problem with that. I think, needs to be the same, we need to be consistent. They don't need to know, well, okay, if I'm gonna do this, then I go there and get the form and do that, but on this, I can do it by email. I think.
Okay,
So we're at 72 hours.
was there a discussion about,
No, I think we said 72 hours could fall with a Monday holiday on a Friday exam, so that it might not work.
Could you just
So-
say the following business day? That way it would accompany, if there was a holiday on Monday, that would be Tuesday?
Following business day.
Yeah,
The following
the
business.
following,
our business
yeah,
days
business
Monday
day
through
for City Hall
Friday?
staff, yeah, for the civil service director. I mean, that's whose business day we're looking for.
So if Monday was a holiday, that would be Tuesday,
Tuesday.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Teresa, quit coming up with stuff. I'm just kidding.
Was there a discussion in regards to, and I mean, we can discuss this when we bring the language back, I guess, if there is a review of that postponement or cancellation and it's not acceptable, or the commission decides that it's not acceptable, I mean, we will have some issues at that point in regards to what we do next, if the exam should have happened, if the commission decides the exam should
Yeah,
happen.
we can't time machine you and put it back and
Yeah.
make a different
So,
decision.
and I guess that's more of a comment, more, you know, than,
Yeah.
I know there's not a,
Realistically, this will probably never be used, but I understand their concerns, and I think this answers that concern. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be guidance for the future.
Okay.
I don't know that we can afford them a remedy, adequate or otherwise, but, yeah, it will afford guidance for the future.
Okay.
So we won't, you'll come up with,
We'll come, yeah, and we'll bring
Okay.
it back. That takes us to agenda item 9, I believe, which is not an action item.
number 9, that's right, promotional examination procedures. As it applies to civil service.
Yes, so this is section 143.032, subsection A, as it applies to civil service rules and regulations, local code 143, section 46, promotions, filling vacancies. As I mentioned, this is not an action item, so it will be brought back for approval based on today's discussion. We discussed this in a previous item, so adjusting the required number of participants to participate from 4. Our recommendation would be 3. That alleviates the, at least at the bat chief level, the need to have all 4 bat chiefs interested in promoting by one person. It really isn't an issue in any of the other ranks. But if we could get, if we could have some discussion on that, then we'll know what to bring back.
So where's the rule stated that it has to be 4? Is that a local rule?
It is, it's 46 subsection
E,
B5. No, I'm sorry, E5.
Yeah.
And this was addressed in that case that you have before you where this rule of 4 was evaluated by the court, but there's also some difference of opinion in different courts in Texas as to whether or not it has to be 4. One said it more than one other person, one court said more than 3. But it really is up to us, and it really does not make sense to require all of our bat chiefs to test because the competitive part of that is always going to be a question.
Okay, Teresa, you said something that has caused me to have a few questions. The 4 participants, that's in our local rules. That is not in the local government code, correct?
No, it's not. The local
Okay.
government code is very vague.
Okay, so in other jurisdictions that you're saying there's differences of opinions on that, they have the same local rules that we have? They have local rules that say 4, or they have local rules that may have a different number, but there's a difference in the court's opinions? I'm not
There's a
following.
difference in the court's opinions as to
Okay.
what that number has to be.
Okay.
Veronica has done the research on other cities.
Okay, I guess you have me. So this rule applies to both police and fire?
Yes.
Okay, do we still do a competitive exam for promotion on one assistant chief or not, in police? Both are appointed, okay. So for that level, either for assistant chief, the 4 applicants is only going to be fire. Okay. I mean, to me, I think 4 is a reasonable number of applicants for positions below the assistant chief level at fire. I would want to drop it to 1. I think there ought to be at least some level of competition. But I mean, to me, I would be inclined to give input that 4 applicants required to make a promotional exam competitive, except at the fire department assistant chief level, in which case 2, 3 participants are required. And I mean, I think we need to discuss whether we should have 2, 3, get some input from staff, some input from the guys, but
We totally agree. I think that, we only have 4 battalion chiefs.
Correct.
So what you're, and we've talked about this, it's really the last working position on the fire department.
Yeah.
You hang up your gear.
yeah,
And by requiring all 4,
It's almost a
it is.
mandatory.
It
We're
is.
not going to have an assistant chief in the fire department promoted by competitive exam
Right.
unless all 4 bat chiefs show up. And
Right.
that almost sounds.
Well, and I think that creates the entire issue.
Yeah.
I also, we did discuss the number 3. We think that's a great number. I think with 2, you're still going to get kind of possibly the same issue. I only need 1 other person to sign up and we're good to go. And I think you're going to kind of have the same problem at 2 that you would have at 4. At least with 3, it breeds the
yeah.
possibility of having 3 competitive people go and take an exam. So that's just, I guess, our take on it and how we feel about it. But we agree. I think 4 is no, and I think 2, you're going to have the same problem. So.
Chief Howard? You want an exception too?
We discussed this issue at command staff meeting yesterday, and everybody was in agreement that 3 was a fair number, 3 people being, if you're testing with 1 other person, it's actually competitive if you're testing for the same position, but
So you're saying for all exams? For all promotional
for all
exams?
promotional exams
You
within
think
the,
3?
when the police department, we thought 3
Okay.
would be a good number.
Okay. Fire input?
So, my opinion, we completely agree with city staff on this. We think 3 is a reasonable number, and actually across the state, that is pretty common. Am I right, Teresa? 3. So, and I think
Yes, it is pretty common.
Some of the language was the statute state that more than 1. I agree with Mason. 2 is, gosh, that's just 2 people. And I think 3 is kind of a middle ground between what we have and what the statute says. 3 people would make it competitive. We did have an issue a while back at the battalion chief level, from captain to battalion chief, where there wasn't enough there either. But 3 absolutely would have made that list. So I think 3 is a
Okay, well.
good number.
Did you say 3? I mean, I know we talked in terms of that. Had you said 3?
Yes, we were prepared to recommend 3.
Okay, but had you said it yet? I don't think so.
I'm not sure.
Okay. So
I say just streamline it 3. all the
just
way.
streamline it at 3 and not make just the limitation at the fire department assistant chief level. Okay. Again, not an action item, so I can't make a motion, but that sounds like.
We have what we need, yes.
Recommendation,
Sounds good, we'll bring that back.
okay. Down to 10, okay. Discussion consideration revising civil service rule code 143, section 45, content of examination.
So this would be subsection I to include a psychological exam for the fire department as well as the police department.
Yep.
Currently, the police department requires applicants to undergo a psychological and mental health exam for beginning positions to meet TCOL certification requirements. Since the fire department doesn't have the same TCOL certification requirement, they don't have that requirement for their beginning positions as far as psychological and mental health exam. Chief Dunn, who is now retired, had asked that this come to the commission for consideration of implementing the same standards. I believe Chief Dunn spoke with Chief Brody in regards to.
Well, fully support for entry exam, psychological evaluation. My only question would be, Since we've already started the process, we have an active list for participants or for applicants. Will this rule apply to those people as well? That would be my only question.
I don't think so on that. We would start with the
We'd have to
next
start the-
tested,
after
yeah,
the next
posted test.
exam.
And we've talked about this before
Yeah.
with consistency. Once the process has already started, we're not going to jack with the process. But
Okay.
it would be a new rule.
Yeah, I fully support psychological exams. I probably should take one too. Just kidding.
It's just for beginning positions. So, in regards to the recommended revisions, they are up on the screen. It should be the back portion of the handout I believe I gave you. It doesn't change much other than adding "and fire department" to that first sentence, and the psychologist or physician shall declare in writing that the applicant is in satisfactory psychological and emotional health to be a peace officer or firefighter.
Okay.
Or, Veronica, I mean, it looks in other rules that it just says all applicants, so, I mean, it specified police because it didn't apply to fire before, so, all applicants for beginning positions
We-
shall undergo.
We can
And leave it.
Yeah,
take
and
both
then-
out if
Then
that's.
it's more consistent and parallel with the language of the other sections. Satisfactory psychological and emotional health. To be a member of the classified service, I mean, that, instead of, peace or fire, just a suggestion. Because the other sections that I'm looking at least, just talk in terms of all applicants.
And leave off the specifics.
Yeah.
Yes, it's your preference, so we can delete instead of insert if,
Yeah.
This is an action item, so, I mean, you guys, that's just kind
I
of my
agree that
thought.
there should be, agree. I don't even understand why the fire department wouldn't go through that personally.
With the city, it's always cost. A psychological exam costs money, and
Yeah, I know.
I, for some reason, I guess they decided
Well, I
they'd do
think
without it.
it actually was that TCOL requires it for police. And so that's why we do it for police, because of the TCOL requirement.
Okay.
And we just never
True,
thought
but I
about
think
asking the
was-
fire.
Yeah, just not included because it would have just added additional
Yeah.
costs.
I mean, I'm part of the security team out at the college, and they made us do it, and we're not even licensed officers.
Right. So,
Okay, so this is an action item here, so. Okay, we move that we change to the recommended revision with maybe just minor changes to not be so specific.
we're happy to make it consistent with the remainder of the rules.
Okay, yeah.
Keith, did you second?
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
And I think this does it for today.
Yes, thank you, guys. That was
Motion
real
to
work.
adjourn.
We understand that was work, and we're probably going to have some more work for you in the future, but we appreciate
Anybody
it.
have any more questions, comments, concerns?
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you, guys.